I love this topic. I kind of geeked
I
out
know you
about it,
do.
kind of thinking about it. I definitely, had a nerd out session because I was like, at first I had 15 books. I was like, okay, can't go into this with 15 books. So I narrowed it down to like 11. And I couldn't narrow it down anymore. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to decide real time which books make the five. um,
So, and the reason this came up, you guys, so I was getting my bookshelf set up, which you'll see behind me now. And so I was kind of reorganizing my books, taking some old books off. I wanted to leave room to be able to add more books. And I was just kind of thinking about it. I'm like, man, we should really we talk about books all the time on the show, but usually it's kind of in passing, or, we might talk about one book. But I thought kind of a great way to do this is maybe we kind of take turns. We each
okay.
mention a book, and then you can kind of talk about how you thought it was impactful, and then the other person can kind of respond if we want to talk about it for a few minutes, and then we
I
kind
love
of
it.
go from there. So why don't you kick us off, Mr. Brindle? The first book of today's episode, top 5 books
So
that impacted me.
I figured since I have a long list of 11 books and we're narrowed down to 5, that I'm going to just start by looking at this list and picking, if I could only pick one, and just narrowing it down from there, right? So the first book I would say that impacted me a lot. It was one of the first books I ever read on my own, that I wasn't like forced to read in school or something like that.
Forced to read school.
Like I didn't like reading when I was a kid. Every time I see my mom is like, she's like, I can't believe the reader you've become. And I'm like, Mom, I'm like, Mom, I'm 33. Mom, I'm 33. Like
Oh my god.
that was like 20 years ago. She's like, you used to hate to read. I had to push you, and you would fake it. I had to quiz you on what the book was about. Like, but anyway, I want to say the first time I read this book, I was probably 19, 20, somewhere in that age range.
Okay.
It's a classic, Rich
Here we
Dad,
go.
Poor Dad. I even
Ooh.
and I have multiple copies of this book. I've given it away to a lot of people over the years. This book in particular is the original print. So
Oh,
this,
first edition.
yeah, I geeked out about that, because they've changed they've changed kind of
Yeah.
what it,
Yeah.
the covers looked like in the design over the years. But Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I'll talk a little bit about the book.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a story about the childhood of the author, Robert Kiyosaki, growing up in Hawaii. He had a biological father who was an educator. He worked for a college. He was a teacher, highly educated, had all types of degrees, PhDs, everything like that. But he had financial problems, and he kind of referred to him as, kind of disrespectfully, if you think about it, his poor dad. But apparently he wrote the book after his dad passed away. I don't know if that makes it better.
Does that make it better or worse?
I don't think so. And so then his best friend at the time, his best friend's name was Mike. And his best friend's dad was a business owner, an entrepreneur. He owned multiple businesses in Hawaii and was one of the richest people in Hawaii. And he basically forms a very close relationship with his friend's dad. And so he's almost like being raised by these two different men and these two different ideologies, and being taught as he grows up. And he basically compares what they taught him and how they differed. And the whole concept of the book is like, what the rich teach their kids versus what the poor in the middle class teach their kids, and how they differ. And it birthed the concept of, the very simplified philosophy of the rich buy assets, the poor buy liabilities. Assets are defined exclusively as something that pays you.
What was the biggest impact after reading this? Like, what was the like, if there was like a one sentence takeaway where you're like, dang, like this was the thing.
Probably that right there. The rich buy
That,
assets,
yeah,
the poor spend
yeah,
their money on liabilities.
yeah,
That just like clicked for me. That, at
yeah.
that point in time in my life, it was just like I was like, it lays it out in such a simplified way. It just makes it so digestible, so relatable, so easy to understand. Um, and it does make a lot of sense, right? Like the average person, the reason why they never get ahead monetarily is they're spending their money on vacations. They're spending their money on cars. They're spending their money on video games, whatever it might be.
Clothes,
It,
purses, yeah.
yeah, accessories, experiences, material items. Whereas the rich person is spending their money on income producing assets, real estate, um, dividend paying stocks.
They might buy those same things, right? I mean, obviously rich people are buying those same the clothes, the cars, the houses, but they're paying for those things with income producing assets,
Yes,
right? The
yes, yes,
cash flow. So that's the thing is everyone sees the end result, right? Everyone sees the fancy cars, the big houses, everyone wants that. But what they don't that's what a lot of people don't understand is the wealthy are paying for those things from income producing assets. So they focus
yeah,
on buying those first and getting those first. I
yes.
read this book. I read this book around the same time as you did, very early on. It was impactful. I didn't want to jump immediately into my next book,
Wait, wait,
but
wait, wait. One more thing.
it's
One more thing.
very applicable here
That's a great book as well.
because it's didn't
Um,
this come from that book? Isn't this originally mentioned in
I don't know. I don't
I
remember.
thought I thought he mentions it in Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then he goes into like the whole philosophy in this. But anyways, keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah. He does. He does. He goes
Yeah.
into like the quadrants and everything. But he ended up
Right.
writing in it, I think, an entire book based on that concept, which turned into that book, which is a great book. I have that book too, up here somewhere.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say about Rich Dad Poor Dad, we can move on. It also birthed the incredibly controversial take that your house is a liability, not an asset. And
Yes.
for years, people were treating their houses that they buy, that they live in, as an asset. And that book was just like, no, it's not. But, by definition of an asset, a liability, the way this book is laying it out, it's a liability because it doesn't pay you. And yeah, it's a very
You
oversimplified.
support that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like,
I honestly would be fine not owning the house I live in. Like beyond the idea, the only thing that like I think like wanting to make customizations to my own house, I think that's the only reason why that I think I would really get pushed into, which I do own my own house now, but for a long time, when you look at again, and maybe I got some of this from that book too, but it's like, man, of all the ways you could invest your money, like when you look at the upkeep that you have to put in on your own house, you're really not making. I mean, yeah, maybe if you stay in your house for 30 years, you'll see a big upside at the end of it, but
the
you're
the
not you're not getting paid,
the
like
book
you
makes
said,
the argument that no one ever got rich by buying
from
a house.
by just owning their own house. Yeah.
Yeah, which very simplified. Okay, continue on
Okay.
into your book.
So, yeah, I wasn't trying to jump, but it was kind of
Related.
a good segue because again, yes, same author. I believe the concept gets mentioned in Rich Dad Poor Dad. Rich Dad Poor Dad I liked, but this book was more impactful for me. And it's honestly, it's really the simplification. And we've talked about this before, but I really think whoever like can simplify complex ideas the most, like whoever can offer, because a lot of us all have access to the same information, but whoever can present it in the most simplified manner a lot of times wins. And that's what I feel like the quadrant is. Like it's almost stupid how simple this is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like this
Agreed.
is not a complex idea by any means, but um so the impact that this book had at the time, I had nothing. I didn't have a business. I didn't have any employees. I was really trying to figure out, like, I was just working sales at the time. And so I was kind of stuck mentally at this place of how do I go from where I'm at now to, being able to have an income producing asset very similar to what you just talked about. And that's kind of what this is almost the roadmap to that, right? That whole concept that we just talked about is, um, how do the rich get income producing assets? This is kind of like, well, this is the roadmap you go through. E is employee. So here's the quadrant. So on this side of it, E is employee. This is where everybody starts, right? So you're working for someone, you're getting a paycheck, you're getting a commission. Then you go to B, which I believe it's business owner.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Business owner.
So now you're generating more income, right? You're not necessarily doing everything yourself. You might have employees. Help me with S. I'm blanking on S here. I know what I is.
Yeah, I remember.
That's what I was trying to...
I as investor, but I don't remember what S is either. I don't remember.
I've got to find. This is gonna drive me crazy if I don't. S. Give me a guess. Oh, I found it. So E is employee. Oh, so we went the wrong direction here. So E is employee, S is small business, B is big business. So small business is like, it's basically you working for yourself, right? E would be like you're working at Walmart, you're getting a paycheck. S is small business. That's like being an insurance agent, right?
Yeah.
You're technically your own business, but you're really just working for yourself. You're probably doing everything in the business. B is big business, right? You've got tons of employees, income's being generated without you being involved. And then I is investor. It's your money. Your money's creating more money. Yes. So again, that was impactful for me because it was kind of, again, the roadmap of how do you get to an income producing asset? Because you're a lot of times, again, if you're coming from middle class America, if you don't have a lot of wealth already, the chances of you going from, I'm just an employee to I'm an investor and I'm investing a bunch of money. Most people don't just make that jump. A lot of times you go through this, I'm self-employed. Now I have a business. Now I'm an investor. Now I'm investing cash. So great book. Highly recommend it. Really like that.
What I remember about that book, before we move on from it,
yeah,
it's been several years since I've read it, so I'm a little foggy on a little bit of some of the details on it. But what I remembered in particular that book does that Rich Dad Poor Dad does not, right? Rich Dad Poor Dad is like your introduction to that type of thinking. It's almost like a changing the way you're thinking book. But that book goes more into the weeds on the X's and O's of actually like investing into real estate, starting a business, buying stocks. Like it really talks about the specifics of like, this is how I do this. This is how I've done this. This is how I've seen other entrepreneurs do this. So it's a lot more of like actionable X's and O's steps, I feel like.
Yeah, and that might be what drew me towards it because, again, there's so many books that will talk about broad subjects like, make a bunch of money in real estate. But like, I love the actionable, like, show me the steps, like, show me. And so I think that's what really kind of it helped my brain grasp onto it, is because it was kind of that roadmap, the actionable steps. And the place I was at in life too. I'm in square one. And I'm like, how do I get to square four? So seeing that pattern, which again, that's the roadmap I went on, is I was working at Verizon selling cell phones. Then I got my insurance license and I was self-employed. I was a business owner, but small business. I'm really working for myself. Then I started Lead Heroes. That became a big business. Now here we are, we have 5 businesses and we invest a lot of cash all the time.
Yep.
We bought several books of business That's huge investments into cash flowing assets. That's what a
Yes.
book of business is. It's a cash flowing asset. So, I have successfully navigated that whole quadrant, and I think it's super powerful. I really do.
Agreed. Great selection. I think that's a great book.
Yeah. Look at
And
us pairing
def
books.
I
Look at
know.
us.
I know.
It's romantic.
Your, your small business could become a big business.
Okay. So my next book was one that I did not read until a couple of years ago. The Rich Dad Poor Dad was one that I read starting out
Yeah.
13, 14 years ago, right? And I've read it multiple times since. I don't know how many times I've read or listened to the audiobook of Rich Dad Poor Dad, multiple times. This book I've read multiple times since I read it, but the first time I did read it was a couple years ago. And I just thought it was so powerful, so impactful, even where I was at in my business at that point in time, a couple years ago, pretty far along. This was probably right before we merged, I want to say.
Okay.
But there was still tons of value I got out of it. And I felt like it's helped me since, post merger, in helping us grow our business, in ways that I hadn't thought of before. Your Next 5 Moves by the great Patrick Bet-David.
I specifically didn't pick this book because I knew you were going to pick this book.
Yeah.
So I specifically didn't.
Now, for any of you that have watched me talk about books over the years or seen videos I've made about books, I'm going to do my best to not talk about the same books that I've talked about over and over and over again. So I am going to not pick some that I normally pick just so I can talk about other ones. Because I talk about this book, I feel like every time I do talk about books.
It's a great book. It's a great book.
It's Your Next 5 Moves, Master the Art of Business Strategy. It is all about, thinking like a chess player, a master chess player who's thinking 5 moves ahead at all times. So the moves are as follows. Move 1 is master knowing yourself, having that self-awareness, which I thought was very powerful. Not that many business gurus, whatever you want to call Patrick, really talk about that. It's like hustle.
Right.
It's like, this is like, okay,
Work harder.
What do you want? What motivates you? What is your desires? Like, let's figure that out first, because everyone's different. Which is very true. Move number 2, master the ability to reason. So develop the skill to think clearly and strategically, which is really a insightful piece of advice. Move number 3, master building the right team, which I can't speak to enough, the importance of that if you want to grow a business. Yes. Number 4, master strategy at scale. And then number 5, master power plays, which I got so much out of move 5 that I even built it into some of my own talks. Power plays, power moves. If you were at the summit, you heard me talk about power moves. I did my whole presentation on power moves at this year's summit. And so, I've gotten some value over the years out of like motivational books like hustle, but this book is none of that. It is 100% strategy, X's and O's, blueprint. And I thought it was just hugely impactful. I really enjoyed the book. Highly recommend it.